We have 6 applications to consider, along with the report on planning appeals. I am happy with this and intend to take the business in order set out on the agenda. Starting with item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Rouse, who's substituted by Councillor Lacey. Apologies have also been received from Councillor Hancock, who's been substituted by Councillor Winley, and Councillor R. Hall, substituted by Councillor Fennell. Apologies have also been received from Councillor Peter Elliott. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We've not received any other apologies.
None of us received, Chair.
Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disposable pecuniary interest and/or other interest not already on their register of interest in any item on the agenda and can withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do members have any interest to declare?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. We now have the minutes of our meeting held on Tuesday, the 21st of March of this year. Are we happy that they are correct record?
Move it, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favour? Here. Apologies, my phone.
Chair, I need to abstain because I wasn't here.
That's fine.
Thank you.
I think there's a couple that weren't here as well. Yeah, 3. The motion was carried. Thank you. We can move to the main business of this afternoon. Before we start, I'd like the clerk to explain for the benefit of members, speakers, and those watching on YouTube how we will deal with them.
Thank you, Chair. This is the procedure for considering the business this afternoon. The Chair will introduce an application, then ask the planning officers to refer members to any late comments or updates received since the agenda was issued. These have been published on the Council's website and hard copies have been circulated to you. After this, the Chair will ask any speakers to address the meeting. Speakers will have 3 minutes to put forward their views. There will be a reminder given by the clerk when 30 seconds remain. At the end of the 3 minutes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask the speaker questions, if necessary, to clarify any points that they have made. After the speaker has addressed the committee and answered any questions, then they will be allowed to remain in the meeting, but they will not be allowed to participate further from this point. The Chair will then open up the meeting for questions to officers, a debate by the committee, and finally, determination on the application by a vote. The votes will be taken by roll call. Finally, members, as you know, this meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be made, which will be placed on the Council's website. Please note that others may choose to copy this recording. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to our first application, which is NED/21/01495/FL at Homewood. I'll hand over to our planning officers.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks consent to redevelop the site for 41 dwellings. It's proposed that 22 of these will be grant funded, delivered by a registered housing provider. The site has previously been granted planning permission for development, and this application seeks to replicate that design and layout. The site is located within an area allocated for housing in the local plan, and so the principle of the site's development as such is acceptable in planning policy terms. Officers contend that the mix of units is acceptable and there is no unacceptable impact on neighbouring properties. And also, Chair, officers consider there is no technical issue that weighs against the proposal. In respect of social mitigation, officers consider the package of mitigation put forward is acceptable in view of the viability issues set out and tested by the Council by the applicant. As such, Chair, officers recommend the application is approved. And just a few slides to an aid memoir from yesterday's site visit, Chair. Members will recall the application site at Homewood. It's outlined in beige here. The Chesterfield Road running north-south generally in this location, and the Five Pits Trail west to east, and then the Park Road industrial area beyond Chesterfield Road to the east. Existing residential properties on Chesterfield Road, and ongoing development on the west and south of the site. And the public footpath referred to runs along the south of the site here, Chair. The application site outlined in red, with the other land owned by the applicant in blue in this instance. And then, Chair, the layout as we saw yesterday for the units. And then 3 indicative slides showing the units that are proposed. And finally, Chair, just a slide showing the application site with the properties on Chesterfield Road in the background, and that supplements the other photographs that are in the report that members will have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have one speaker for this application, Stephen Haslam. Would you like to take the table? Old hand at this. If you'd like to state your name and 3 minutes when you're ready.
Am I switched on now? Excellent. Thank you, Chair. My name is Stephen Haslam, Mitchell Proctor Architects, speaking in support of this application. As reported by your planning manager, this site and the development already benefits from a live planning consent granted previously for the 41 dwellings in August 2021. The site layout and house types have essentially remained exactly the same, other than very minor amendments to suit highways and drainage and the location of the communal bin store. This application has been made to alter a condition to allow for the affordable housing element to be grant funded. The previous permission restricted the registered provider, Great Places, from doing this. Great Places Housing Group is a registered social landlord that owns and manages 24,000 properties across the North West, Yorkshire and East Midlands. The organisation has been working closely with the applicant for some time and is committed to providing 22 affordable homes on this scheme, which will be grant funded through their Homes England Strategic Partnership Programme. Great Places have secured £240 million through the Strategic Partnership Programme to develop nearly 5,000 affordable homes across the North by 2028. There is an ambitious development pipeline to deliver 1,000 affordable homes a year over the next 10 years. The district of North East Derbyshire forms one of those organisations' key growth areas. The 22 grant-funded affordable homes proposed as part of this development equates to 54% of the scheme and will be owned and managed by Great Places, with the properties being added to their stock portfolio. A neighbourhood service manager, under the supervision of an area service manager, will carry out the management role and will deal with lettings and tenancy management matters. This team is based at the regional office in Sheffield. All 22 affordable homes will be let as affordable rent and will comprise of the following mix: 10 2-bed homes, 10 3-bed homes, and 2 4-bed homes. There is a recognised need for 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes for affordable rent within this area. Our first let,
30 seconds remaining.
On first let, all properties will be allocated via nominations from North East Derbyshire District Council through advertisement on Choice Move and their choice-based letting scheme. The remaining 19 homes will be delivered for outright sale. During the course of this application, we have worked closely with your planning manager and former director to get this application into a format which suits all parties and promises to deliver the housing development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, we've got off nicely. Thank you. If you'd like to take your seat. Are there any questions for our planning officers? No. Wow. Okay. So I can open the floor to debate, should there be a need. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I note in this case, the 106 requests, we've got 208,000 provision, and we've got requests of 460 from DCC, 20 towards health provision, and 34,700 and a further just short of 11 for off-site play provision. What often ends up being provided with applications like this, we find the money when it comes to DCC for the education, and we find it for health. One area which we don't end up finding money for, because it's all about who's pushing it, is very often the off-site play provision. So that's a concern of mine. The other will get looked at and will get pushed forward, and it will be fulfilled. But if nobody at this point looks after this part of it, the play provision, this is something that doesn't actually get done. So it's not to say that this is more important than education and health. Certainly not. It's one that very often, if we don't push it forward, it won't get done. So a note, and I know this is a part for debate and not a part for proposing anything at this point in the application. But when we look at grant permission subject to conditions, and we're leaving the delegated authority to the planning manager for the 106 agreement, what I'd like to see included is that the one that we've requested as a council, the 34,700 and the 11,000, is that is definitely included in conditions, and that the rest of it be down to the planning manager. So they're my thoughts, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I do agree. We tend to see a lot of provision going to county, and we seem to lose out. I'd like to see, again, I know we're not into proposal, but if we do go ahead with this, I would like a definite provision made for parks monies for North East, because we do tend to dip out on this, and it's quite important. Any other comment? No, thank you. If there's no other comments to be made, I'll open the floor for a motion. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair.
Ooh.
Happy to propose, along with what it says on page 25, 7, recommendation, grant permission subject to conditions, all as we've said, but include the play provision for the amounts quoted on page 24, 6.32. So I'd like to propose that, Chair.
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you. All those in favour? We have a roll call, please.
I think it appears by acclamation. Is that the case, members? Are all members happy with
may I
that?
just ask one question, please? In noting what the committee's view appears to be, the rest of the money, I presume members would be happy for that to be prorated amongst the other two requestors. So have the off-site play provision in full, and then the rest of the money divided pro rata between the other two. That's clear, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to item 2. NED/22/01213. Thank you. /FL Upper Town.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to refer members to the late comments report of yesterday. We've had a number of emails from the applicant's agent, which have been replicated in full as far as they affect this application in that update, and brief comments of officers to address them. But in terms of the updates report, Chair, that does address and bring to members' attention all the applicant's agent's late comments. And officers, Chair, apologise for the issue about referencing of other applications in the report, but officers are of the view that doesn't make the committee prejudiced in determining the application this afternoon, as they don't raise issues of planning merit that would alter the balance. In this case, Chair, the applicant seeks to construct a new house on the site, and in so doing remove all the other buildings from it. Additionally, 2 other ancillary buildings would be constructed to there, referred to as the barn and the room that would assist with covering the water supply. In addition, Chair, as a result of that activity, the domestic curtilage would also be extended as a result of any permission that may be granted, and that's set out in the report, and plans and slides are referenced with that. The site lies in open countryside, Chair, within a primary area of multiple environmental sensitivity, which comprises the best landscapes within North East Derbyshire. Officers contend that the resultant dwelling would fail to accord with your local plan policy SS9 due to its scale, massing and layout. Notwithstanding the comments made otherwise, officers also consider it would adversely affect the important landscape in which it would be located, and be especially so in short distance views from the local highway and public right-of-way network. There don't appear, Chair, to be any technical reasons otherwise, though, to resist the application. Accordingly, Chair, officers are recommending that the application is refused. Just in terms of some aid memoirs to yesterday's site visit again, Chair, members will recall us seeing Culham Lane as it winds through the settlement of Upper Town. The application site lies to the south-southeast of Culham Bell Lane. It's part of a wider site that incorporates this additional land here, Chair, as set out in the paperwork. The applicant seeks to construct a new dwelling, which is this building here, a new barn building here, Chair, and a plant room to the north of the site, Culham Bell Lane running here. The new public right of way that's proposed to be diverted from its current line would run to the east of the site here, rather than through the existing site as shown in the papers. This is the existing farmhouse, Chair, that's left-hand side of this building here, and an associated agricultural building to the right-hand side. And the new dwelling would sit, it's larger, but it would sit roughly in this area of the site. That's the dwelling that's proposed, Chair. And that's the layout of the building, the room layout. That, Chair, comprises the building that would be the barn referred to in the papers, and that is the plant room. And just to remind members, Chair, that is the building that was in discussion yesterday. This portion of the building is the existing farmhouse, and this is the building attached to it that was previously used or last used for agricultural purposes. And just looking into the site from the highway network, Chair, this is taken from Culham Bell Lane, the application site to the right here, and just shows the footpath currently runs through the buildings. And then finally, Chair, that's from a slide taken from Culham Bell Lane itself back towards the existing farmhouse. I think that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two speakers for this item, an agent and a supporter. We have William Marshall as the agent. If you'd like to confirm your name and 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Good afternoon, all. My name is William Marshall. I'm the agent for this application and will be speaking on behalf of the applicant. This is the first of two applications that my client has been determined at this committee today, which is the culmination of 3 years of work to transform a dilapidated site into my client's dream home for their family. After me, you'll be hearing from Rose Walker, who will speak about landscape character. And so in order to avoid repetition, I'll be speaking solely about the planning merits of the application. Firstly, I welcome the clarifications made in the late representations document, which confirm the red line boundary and the fact that the proposed development will not impact on the footpath running through the site. However, we believe there is still a fundamental misunderstanding of Part 1F policy SS9. To clarify matters, Part 1F states in full, and I quote, "The change of use, reuse, limited infilling or redevelopment of vacant, derelict or previously developed land, which would not have a greater impact on the character of the countryside than the existing development," end quote. Meaning that for Part 1F to apply, the site needs to be vacant or derelict or previously developed land, just one, not all three. Given that the site in its existing form is both vacant, as the farmhouse is currently unused, and derelict, as the barns are falling apart, the requirement for the whole site to be previously developed land does therefore not apply, and Part 1F is engaged. This allows for a larger dwelling, amendments to residential curtilage, and the change of use from agricultural to residential. And given this policy allowance, the question that remains is whether the proposed development will have a greater impact on the character of the countryside than the existing. Rose will talk about this next, but it's clear that the existing site is a collection of dilapidated buildings and that the type of buildings at Uptown are large and varied. The size of the proposed replacement dwelling, whilst bigger than the existing, will therefore not be excessive when compared to what already exists nearby. Regarding design, it is acknowledged that the proposed dwelling is more modern than the existing. However, this is a subjective matter. Design cues have been taken from traditional linear farmhouses and gable ends, such as those immediately to the north, and the applicant has committed to using natural stone, but there is some modern glazing to make the most of the view south and to create an architectural feature. Modern designs are not unusual, an example of this being Slack Farm nearby, and whilst it is acknowledged that every planning case must be determined on its own merits, there must also be a degree of consistency in decision making, and therefore if Slack Farm can be approved, then the applicant's replacement dwelling, which follows similar principles, should also be acceptable. The proposed replacement dwelling is therefore no larger than the existing buildings in the area, and whilst it has modern elements, is no different to other approved schemes in the district. I also want to remind members that this application has no objections from members of the public and 4 letters in support, somewhat of a rarity in rural locations. It is therefore respectfully requested that the application is approved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I just have one for clarification. I know the building isn't being lived in, but are there people living on the site?
Yes, my client is currently living in 2 caravans on site.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll move to the next speaker, which is Rose Walker. If you'd like to confirm your name and 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Hello all, my name is Rose Walker. I'm a Chartered Landscape Architect. For this application and for the following application that we'll be discussing in a minute, I've undertaken the Landscape and Visual Impact Appraisal, or LVIA, which looks at the anticipated impacts on landscape character and visual amenity. I have been a landscape architect specialising in LVIA for 10 years and have been chartered since 2015. I run the landscape team at Brindley and Green Environmental Consultants, and the LVIA written for these applications has been peer reviewed by one of my colleagues. Looking at the proposed farmhouse development, the main landscape character effects of the proposed development will be on the site. A substantial adverse impact is appraised during construction, as construction activity is incongruous in the rural site, although the effects are both temporary and reversible. This level of effect is typical for construction activity within a rural context. By year 1 and year 15 of operation, the effect on the landscape character of the site would reduce to minor beneficial. This is because the proposed development would improve the landscape condition and scenic quality of the site by removing the dilapidated and derelict existing buildings and rationalising the number of these to 3 buildings. Whilst the height of the proposed dwelling is taller than the existing, the footprint is comparable to the existing buildings in this part of the site. The heights and footprints of the other 2 proposed buildings are also comparable to existing buildings. The proposed development will provide an aesthetic of a primary dwelling in a hard-standing yard with 2 smaller subsidiary outbuildings. This is similar in character to a farmyard and echoes the baseline character of the site. The proposed material for the new buildings is stone, which is in keeping with both the farmhouse building to be replaced, as well as other buildings within the local area. In addition, the proposed dwelling uses architectural design elements which reference the historic buildings within Upper Town, such as the chimneys on each end of the roof and the gables above the windows on the southeastern elevation. These architectural elements are already referenced in nearby local buildings, such as those on the opposite side of Columbell Lane. For the wider landscape, the effects on the proposed development are reduced in comparison to those on the site. These effects reduce to neutral during year 1 of operation because the proposed development echoes some of the key characteristics of the landscape character types within the surrounding landscape. So it echoes the dispersed sandstone farmsteads and the clusters of farmsteads and cottages, which are recorded in the Wooded Slopes and Valleys LCT. The LVIA shows that key views of the proposed development are from the public rights of way on the southern and northeastern site boundaries, as well as the highway adjacent. By year 1 of operation, the existing unsightly and derelict buildings within the site will be removed from the middle ground of these views. They will be replaced by new buildings which reference local materials and architectural features. In turn, this would improve the views and give a minor beneficial effect. Views from further afield would experience reduced effects due to intervening vegetation. I hope this has provided an overview of the landscape and visual aspects related to the proposed development and helped to further clarify the reasoning behind my professional opinion that the proposed development is beneficial in landscape and visual terms following construction. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you. If you'd like to take a seat. Are there any questions for our officers? Councillor Armitage?
Thank you. You stated that the development is outside the settlement development limit. Right, where does the settlement development limit run?
There isn't one that's defined for Upper Town in your local plan, Chair.
So there isn't one.
That's right.
Okay. And how much bigger is this development than the existing building, which is already there, percentage wise?
Not undertaken an assessment of the percentage, Chair, but I've got some measurements if Councillor Armitage would like me to
Yes,
to give them to you. The existing farmhouse, so it's the existing farmhouse rather than the agricultural building next door to it, which is slightly taller. So the existing farmhouse is 5.9 metres to apex of roof, and the new dwelling is proposed at 8.8 metres to roof. The existing farmhouse building is 12.7 metres long by 4.7 metres deep. Again, that's not including the agricultural building next door to it. And the proposed dwelling is 22.5 metres long and 8 metres deep. So the new dwelling would sit roughly, albeit larger than where the existing dwelling is, plus the agricultural building next door to it.
so you've included the agricultural building next door in the measurements.
Now, just so I can be clear, Chair, the existing dwelling house that's on the site is 12.7 metres long, whereas the proposed dwelling house is 22.5 metres long. But I'm trying to explain that the proposed dwelling is on the rough footprint of the existing dwelling plus that agricultural building that sits next door to it.
It will basically replace two semi-derelict buildings, because I know the building, I've seen it there for 8 or 9 years, and it's slowly gone down and down, and it would basically replace one eyesore with another, with something which is far more appealing.
Well, the judgment that you will have to make is the impact of the new development on the character of the area and the countryside. So that's the judgment you'll have to make. The issue that the application is made to construct 3 new buildings, in effect, a new dwelling, the new barn cum garage and the plant room, and all the other buildings on that site would be removed. So that's the equation, I guess, that you need to consider as what does the application propose. So if you were of the view that the removal of those other buildings was material to your consideration and all the other matters fell away or weren't of import, then that would be ultimately what you're considering. But your policy requires you to go one step further than that and consider the impact of the buildings on the character of the countryside.
Are there any questions for the officers? No? I'll open the floor for debate, should there be one. Councillor Armitage?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've looked at this and I can remember this building, both the buildings, well, all of the buildings, let's face it, are a bit of an eyesore in the village. We've looked at the effect on the landscape, and quite frankly, I think it won't make much difference. They're all different buildings in Upper Town. If you go around, there are none the same. And this would be, just as far as I'm concerned, there wouldn't be a problem with it. If we look at SS9, point 8, point F, it said that on change of use, so reuse, limited infill and redevelopment of vacant, derelict or previously developed land. And I think that this fits that criteria quite easily. And what's going to happen if we turn it down? I can't see, it'll just get more and more derelict, and it'll end up being an eyesore where this gentleman is obviously going to do a lot to it and build it up. And every building that is put in for, it's going to replace something which is going to fall down. And what's the best thing as regards the landscape? A heap of rubble or a new house?
Any other comment? No? Oh, councillor. Oh, we've got two now. Ladies first.
No, I'm just going to agree with William actually, because looking at these pictures, it is in a dreadful state, isn't it? And there's a tree growing out of a building. Yeah. I must admit, yesterday when I looked at the plans, I thought, oh dear, that looks a little bit large and not in keeping. But actually, when you look at this, the overall size and impact, it's better than what's there.
Councillor Hartshorn.
I'm another one who's in agreement with William on this one, to be honest. And I think the proposal gives us a much better building than what's already there, and provides somebody with a nice house to live in a nice area.
Thank you. That's the end of the debate. I'll ask for a motion to be put forward. Councillor Armitage.
Yeah, I go against officer's recommendation, and we look at policy SS9F, which involves the reuse of a development which is already there. It's got all of the, I think most of the houses in Upper Town are on spring water, and they do have to have a building in which to house everything. So that is, it's a function that's definitely needed. And I think as regards the landscape on SDC3, I think it's it's a non-starter really, because it's going to improve the landscape no end. This.
Have I a seconder? Councillor Liggett.
Chair, if I may, just before the vote's taken, just to ask members if they are minded to grant permission for the scheme, whether they would delegate conditions to myself in consultation with yourself and the vice chair, or whether you have suggested conditions that you would want attaching to any permission. So that's the query, Chair.
I think we'll leave it to you, Adrian.
That would be in consultation with yourself and the vice chair.
Okay. So we're going to have a vote. A
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear on that then, so it's to reject officer recommendations and to approve the application, essentially because it would be in line with policy SS9, with the final conditions delegated to the planning manager, development manager in consultation with you and the vice chair. Is that the essence of it? So would you like me to now carry out a roll call, Chair?
Yes, please.
Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Foster. Councillor Fennell. Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Lacey.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Ruff.
Against.
And Councillor Winley.
For.
I make it 7 for the motion and 4 against, so the motion has passed, Chair.
Thank you. We can move on to the next application, which is same development, different number, 22/01272/FL.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, again, I refer members to the late comments report of yesterday. It again addresses the issues raised by the applicant's agent, Chair, and officers apologise again for any error in referencing applications in the report. But again, this isn't considered prejudicial to the determination of the application by the committee. In this case, Chair, the applicants seek consent to remove an agricultural building and replace it with another. The site lies in open countryside and within a primary area of multiple environmental sensitivity, comprising the best landscapes within North East Derbyshire. The existing building has a limited height overall, whereas that now proposed is, in officer's opinion, more bulky and so more impactful on the area, being readily apparent in localised views, even if it is largely softened in longer views of the site. Officers acknowledge there is no requirement to submit the internal layout of buildings, but without that and details of the farming activities taking place on the site, officers are unable to assess how the building may serve the farming enterprise of the unit. Adding to officer concerns is the lack of information regarding levels, and so how the building may sit on the land in its finished form. Notwithstanding that, Chair, there appear no technical reasons to resist the application, but officers in this case, Chair, recommend the application is refused. And just to take you through some slides as an aid memoir to yesterday, again, the application site in beige here, the application that you've just considered lies to the southwest, Cullen Bell Lane coming through Upper Town. And in this case, Chair, the application site outlined in red, and the applicants seek consent to demolish a range of agricultural buildings, primarily single story, but with a two-story and higher central element. And as part of that redevelopment, a line of right of way would run through part of the single story element of that, and it would result in leaving single building on the site. There is a track already formed across the land that runs in this direction. It is proposed that that's modified to run towards the building, but the applicant is keen for members to be aware that planning consent isn't sought for that, and it would rely on permitted development rights, which do allow for the formation of tracks on holdings of this size. But in all cases, the track would then need to be reasonably necessary for agricultural purposes. But that is not an issue that the applicant wishes to be considered this afternoon, Chair, and he is going to rely on agricultural permitted rights. In terms of the building itself, Chair, you can see top left the floor layout of the existing building. So that's in red. The central spine of it, this area here, is two-story, with the remainder being single-story. And you can see the design of the building on the right-hand side and the bottom of the slide. This is the elevation that would face southeast, and this is the elevation that would face onto the new track that is proposed to be formed. And the other two elevations you can see referenced at top right and bottom left. So just in terms of pictorial form, again, with the caveat that, as we discussed yesterday, that the site isn't flat, although the drawings do show it as a flat site. The existing building outline is in red. So you can see the mainly single-story element with the central spine being two-story in height, and then from the elevation that you would see from the road. And finally, Chair, just a couple of photographs of the building itself. This is the existing building on the site, single-story elements wrapping around the building with the central two-story spine that I've referred to. And then looking from Cullen Bell Lane itself to the site, and hopefully this exemplifies the issue about levels, which I was discussing earlier, but the single-story element of the building either side with the two-story spine in the middle. I think that's, well, just for sake of completeness, Chair, this is the track that's referred to that's been formed. As I say, the applicant is intending to realign the track to access the new elevation of the building that will face towards Cullen Bell Lane, and we're assured that the rest of the track will be reinstated to field. But again, just to make it clear, Chair, the applicant isn't seeking planning consent for that track, and he would intend to rely on permitted rights to form it. I think that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the same two speakers again. Mr. Marshall. 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you again. As previously discussed, I'm the agent. I'll be speaking on behalf of the applicant. So this plan application relates to the provision of a replacement barn to the east of the main Upperdown farmhouse that you determined prior to this. Once again, my colleague Rose will speak about landscape character. Again, it is noted that within the late representations document, the officer clarifies that planning permission is not sought for the access track, and this is welcomed and should not form part of any planning balance. Moving to the planning merits of the case, as confirmed in paragraph 6.6 of the planning officer's report, the proposed replacement barn would occupy a lesser footprint and a lesser volume than the existing barn. The proposals are therefore compliant with Part 1A of Policy SS9 of the local plan, which allows for a replacement building for the same use and is not significantly larger than the building it replaces. This aspect is therefore quite clear. However, Part 2 of SS9 also requires all development to respect the form, scale, and character of the landscape through careful siting, scale, design, and use of materials. Ms. Walker will discuss landscape character in more detail, but it's clear that the existing barn is a mismatch of metal cladding, concrete blocks, and old timber supports. There is no planning policy requirement to demonstrate how an agricultural building is or will be used, but it is clear that the existing barn is not fit for purpose for modern agriculture. As a result, the replacement barn with simple dimensions and a flexible footprint has been submitted. However, the officer's report concludes that the design of the replacement barn is more akin to an industrial building than something that is agricultural. We strongly disagree with this assessment and have provided examples of approved barns within our submitted planning statement that share similar materials and design to what we are proposing. In terms of scale and massing, numerous barns in the area can be considered comparative, including to the north of the site in Uppertown itself, a recently completed barn on Alice Head Road to the northeast, and on Hodge Lane to the west. Given that all these are larger than our proposed barn, we struggle to see why it is an unacceptable design. In our view, it is therefore clear that the proposed replacement barn will not see an increase in volume and footprint and will match the materials and massing of neighbouring barns and those recently approved. We therefore respectfully request that the planning application is approved and the replacement barn allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Cooper and Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. What is the existing building currently used for, please?
So it is used for an agricultural purpose. My client has a small holding, so it's currently used for storage. They did have chickens, but then there was the avian flu, so that's not currently being used for chickens, but their plan is to get chickens again.
Councillor Powell.
Similar question, really, Mr. Marshall. Bearing in mind the whole site is not as big as a farm and is somewhat smaller. What agricultural activity is currently taking place or is proposed?
Yeah, so the barn actually, well, my client owns the field that the barn is in and also the field to the south of the farmhouse, if you can remember that on the plan. So at the moment, as I say, they used to have chickens. They've also had goats in the past. They've also done like hay crop as well. And so the barn at the moment is currently just used for the storage of that, but it is, I believe the timber supports inside are old telegraph poles, so it's not currently fit for purpose. So this is to kind of consolidate everything that's there and build something that is purpose built, essentially.
So you wouldn't consider it's a large barn for a small site?
No, as I say, it's an adjacent field as well. I appreciate that it's not the biggest farm in the world, but it's a replacement building. Footprint's the same, smaller, and the volume's the same.
Thank you. If you'd like to take a seat. Oh, Councillor Armitage.
Thank you. The site is, it has an agricultural number, I take it.
Yes, my client has a small holding, county parish holding number, yeah.
Yeah, so it has an agricultural holding number.
Yes.
Right, and the other thing is, how many acres are there total of grassland?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. Look at my client, I'm not sure if she knows. Around 5.
5 acres. Oh, thank you.
Any other questions? No, thank you. If you'd like to take your seat. You're up again, Miss Walker.
Thank you again, Chair. As mentioned for the previous application, I have also undertaken the LVA for the proposed barn development in parallel with the proposed dwelling application. As before, my work looks at the anticipated impacts on landscape character and visual amenity, and it has been peer reviewed by my colleague from within the landscape team at Brindon Green. The largest landscape character effects of the proposed barn development would be those on the site. Construction activity would be incongruous within the site, given the lack of existing construction or similar activity within it. Therefore, the effects of construction on its landscape character would be substantially adverse. Again, I hasten to add that this is typical for construction of a development within a rural environment, and it is worth noting that the effects during construction would be short-term, reversible and temporary. The effect on the landscape character of the site in years 1 and 15 of operation would reduce to minor beneficial. The existing barn within the site is in poor condition, which adversely affects the perceived landscape quality and scenic quality within the baseline site. The replacement with the proposed barn would remove the dilapidated and unattractive existing barn and in turn improve the scenic quality and landscape condition of the site. Looking in turn at the massing of the proposed development in comparison to the existing building and in comparison to local vernacular, excuse me, the footprint of the proposed barn is smaller than that existing, and the overall ridge height is comparable. The overall proposed barn will appear more as a single structure than the existing building, which comprises a two-storey core with single-storey wings at either side. Whilst this single block structure would appear as a larger mass, its smaller footprint would reduce the lateral extent of built form within the site. Thus, from a landscape point of view, I consider these two elements to balance. In addition, there are already other barns present in the local vicinity with a greater footprint and massing, such as at Plumtree Farm on the opposite side of Cullen Bell Lane. In terms of appearance, the proposed sheeting and blockwork materials palette echoes that of other barns found locally and is typical of an agricultural barn. Similar barns are found within the wider landscape and echo the rural agricultural character and the dispersed farmsteads characteristic that is recorded in the published landscape character assessment for the wooded slopes of Vallis LCT, as well as the sparsely scattered isolated farmsteads recorded in both the enclosed moors and heaths LCT and the enclosed Gritstone Uplands LCT. Given that the proposed development echoes this wider character, the effects on the wider landscape character in these LCTs during years 1 and 15 of operation is neutral. The public rights of way on the southern and north-facing site boundaries and the highway on Cullen Bell Lane are the key locations from which the proposed barn development will be viewed. For these views, the changes within them would again occur within the middle ground. By year 1 of operation, the removal of the unattractive existing barn from the view and replacement with the proposed development would give a minor beneficial effect due to a detractor being removed from the viewpoint. Intervening vegetation would limit views from further afield. Hopefully this has helped to explain some of the reasoning behind the professional judgments that I've recorded within the LVA.
That's
and of
time,
course, I
Chair.
can answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Powell?
Point of clarification, really. On the previous application, we approved a house, small building for the water element, and a building described as a barn. So there's already a barn there from the previous application. Does they need another? Why would they need another barn in your view? Well, not why. I can't ask you why they would need another barn. That's not up to you to say that. But just for clarification about what we've approved and what we've been asked to approve.
Just on the previous application, Chair, the long, thin building to the south east of the new dwelling house was described in the application as a barn, although from my eye, it looked more like an extended three-doored garage, but it was described as a barn. In terms of the current application, you've heard what's been said to you this afternoon and you've read the officer report. Officers did seek further clarification in terms of the agricultural activity on the site and also any more information as to how the building would be used, particularly in view of its design, the window openings and the large roller shutter door that would face actually away from the track that would access it, which would be faced by the single personnel door. We were sent some photographs, as Mr. Marshall says, which I can't validate, but they did show goats and chickens and a field being mowed of hay, although I can't say where that was. We did seek that extra clarification to try and inform our advice to you this afternoon, Chair, but we didn't receive anything. So as Councillor Armitage discussed with Mr. Marshall, there is a holding number, agricultural holding number on the unit, but the two sites, as far as the information that I have combined, both the one that will now be built on of the house and the barn and the plant room and this application site, the housing application site is described as 0.932 hectares and this site is 0.35 hectares. I believe that comes out at roughly 3.2, 3.3 acres. So I can't comment on future use of the building, but I do hope some of that background to our officers have come to our conclusion helps, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, this barn doesn't look much like a barn to me, as outlined in the report. Is there anything that would be acceptable to you?
Notwithstanding the issue about the site size and how the land would be used, you would expect agricultural buildings to be located in this environment, but you would expect them to be constructed to meet a certain requirement. So it would have been helpful in this case to understand perhaps what machinery was used for the land and what the use of the land was to be for, whether it was for sheep or other livestock or just for storing hay. But certainly in terms of the design of it, particularly in terms of the window openings and the personnel door at the one end, that's not what I would normally expect to see from an agricultural building that's to be used for those purposes long term. You would expect some openings. Often agricultural buildings are open-sided, particularly where they've got livestock being added to them. So in answer to your question, Councillor Cooper, there would, if the site is generally being used for agriculture, you would expect some buildings to serve that. It's just in this instance, because of the character of the building and its design, officers do have concerns about its impact on the character of the area, particularly in the local views from the public footpath network, which runs very close to the site, whether in its diverted form or its current form, and the highway network.
Are there any further questions? If not, I'll open the floor for debate. Councillor Armitage?
Yeah. I'd like just to make members aware that I am qualified as a farmer and I can speak on this. In that area, when the whole of the Ashover ward has been plagued by theft of agricultural machinery. And this building, well, the existing building, couldn't hold anything. We've been asked about, it's actually a smaller footprint. It's in keeping with the area as regards what's proposed. And if we're talking about hay, well, hay's got to be stacked up. And the way they stack it up these days are using half-ton and ton bales, and they're lifted up and stacked up as high as they can go. And for security reasons, this building has to be, it's the only way you can secure things from being stolen. We've had in the area, there was a teleshift mobile handler stolen. We've had tractors stolen, you name it.
Councillor Armitage, we're going off the point here.
No, we're not.
Yes, you are.
No, I disagree with you because Adrian has said that it's not used for agriculture.
That's not what he said, it's the design of the building.
Well,
I think we need to move on, Councillor Armitage.
Right, well, the design of the building is such for security reasons, for storing stuff securely so it's not stolen.
Any other comment? No, I'll open the floor for a motion. To debate.
I appreciate that, Chair. I've got very similar concerns to, I believe, what our Vice Chairs put forward and the concerns of the officers. I won't skirt around it. I've got concerns when we look at 6.8 paragraph, page 54. When we speak about domestic style windows, how it's been designed, current agricultural use, we're seeing more and more buildings being put up in North East Derbyshire, and we're seeing them as a committee here, where people are asking to put buildings up for agricultural purposes, and then 3-4 years later, 5 years later, they're coming back for conversion, and we've seen a lot of them. We've seen one recently in Dronfield, and we've seen one recently in the Greenbelt in Killamarsh, and we discussed that one in Killamarsh at the length here. Same number of openings, the openings aren't going to change, doors in the same place, windows in the same place, and then later on in the same ground, somebody wants a barn further down in the same. I think Councillor Lacey over there knows which one I'm talking about. You've been involved in it, and we're getting more and more of this. Now, if we look at the possible future use, which our officers can't comment on, and rightly so, it's not a material consideration, completely got that, and neither are the past applications. When we look at the past applications, they've been for, 2 of them, been for dwellings, dwelling houses. So all the signs are there. Now, if we're happy to do this as a planning authority and encourage more of this, this is the way to go. But we must do it with our eyes open. All the signs are there, and we just got to be honest. Yes, we're happy for people to build agricultural buildings and then possibly later convert them. We just got to be square, so people that come along know that we're happy to do that. Or here, while we can't use possible future use and past applications as material considerations, our officers have given us plenty policies to look at: SS1, SS9, SDC3, 12 of the local plan, and 3 policies and the Ashover neighbourhood plan. So there's plenty there for us, and it's those policies we should be discussing, not that it currently looks like an eyesore and somebody must do something about it and it's going to look much better. It's the actual policies that are important. So we've got to look what's actually going on in North East Derbyshire, and we've got to decide as the planning authority which way we do want to go. Like I said, we can't consider those things I've mentioned as planning considerations, but that's what's actually happening. Aside from that, we've got policy that actually contains this sort of development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have to agree with everything you've just said. Are there any other comments to be made? No. Quite happy to move it to a roll call vote, and we'll go through the motion.
Sorry, Chair, have we actually got a motion then?
I'm happy to put forward that we go with officers' recommendations. Thank you.
So the motion is and that is to refuse planning permission. You're right, Chair. Right. Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Foster. Councillor Fennell. Councillor Hartshorn.
Against.
Councillor Lacey.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Ruff.
For.
And Councillor Winley.
For.
So that's 9 for and 2 against. The motion to approve officer recommendations and reject the application has passed, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. We can move on to the next application, which is at Milltown NED /22/01077/FLH.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, once again, I refer members to the late comments report of yesterday. In this instance, Chair, unfortunately, due to a variety of reasons, the property name does appear as 2 separate names throughout the report. Part of that is a result of the application form, I'm afraid, but again, it's not considered by officers that is prejudicial to the determination of the applications this afternoon, Chair. There are 2 applications that are identical in form that members have next on the agenda. I intend doing one introduction, Chair, and one presentation, if that's acceptable to you, but you will need to take 2 votes over the 2 applications because there may be different considerations in respect of the 2 of them.
Thank you.
Just in terms of the first application, Chair, that seeks straightforward planning permission for a single-storey extension, with the second seeking listed building consent for that extension. Just to confirm, Chair, the property is a listed building, and therefore, as members will be aware, special considerations apply to it and development that affects it. Site lies in open countryside and within a primary area of multiple environmental sensitivity, comprising the best landscapes within North East Derbyshire. In the countryside, Chair, members are aware that new development is strictly controlled, and in respect of dwellings outside of settlements, policy requires that extensions which either cumulatively or individually involve a significant change to the scale and character of the original dwelling should be particularly assessed and in many cases restricted. And as I say, Chair, this supports the generally restricted policies in respect of development in countryside areas. In this case, Chair, due to the scale of extensions added to the dwelling, both previously and in this instance, and the visibility of the site, officers contend that the extension would result in such a change and so is unacceptable. Members will note the previous applications determined on the site, Chair, and I've got a slide that we saw yesterday, and I'll reprise that again this afternoon. An extension at this location that's now before you for consideration this afternoon, coupled with one that was subsequently approved, was previously refused in the planning history, Chair, because of the adverse effect that the 2 extensions cumulatively would have on the dwelling in terms of its heritage value. Officers retain that view, Chair, and that the extension now proposed would, in addition to that in the course of construction, impact adversely on the overall heritage value of the building. There are, Chair and officers' opinion, no identified public benefits that outweigh that conclusion. And additionally, Chair, both applications are recommended for refusal. Just in terms of the application site, Chair, as we saw yesterday, application site, coloured in beige here, sits within the Milltown Falgate area, Falgate Quarry primary area down to the southwest, Jetting Street here, Chair, and the highway network along the Amber Valley here, and then up towards Milltown, Falgate proper. Recent development within the former quarry down to the south of the site. The application site, Chair, outlined in red. The extension is to the eastern elevation of the building. Previously, extensions have been permitted to the northern elevation, and as I've said, to the western elevation. So in terms of this application, Chair, the application seeks consent for this extension on the side of the property. And there would be an opening form to it. And so in detail, this is the existing front, albeit with an extension permitted in this area here. And I'll show you a slide of that in a second. And this application, and these applications now seek consent for this to the the eastern elevation. And this is the extension that's proposed, Chair, here. And then that's the rear elevation as is. And you can see the extension previously consented, which is this area here. The application extension is this one here. Just in terms of the planning history, Chair, as I've just mentioned, there was an application previously refused for extensions to both the western and eastern elevations. The subsequent application just for this addition to the western elevation was approved, and it's in the course of construction, as we saw on the virtual site visit yesterday. So this extension is being constructed. This is the front of the building, and you can just see the outline of the extension and the excavations associated with it that's under development. And just spinning around, Chair, this is also the front of the building. The extension would be on this elevation here. So this area here, Chair, would see the extension. Thank you.
Thank you. I do believe we've got 2 speakers for this one. On Milltown. This is Simon Woltley. Thank you. If you'd like to confirm your name in 3 minutes when you're ready.
Yes, Chair. My name is Simon Wortley, and I'm the applicant for planning permission and listed building consent for this property. By way of background, I've lived at Cumberbank House for almost 13 years with my wife Janine and our 2 children, Olivia and William. Prior to that, I was brought up in Chesterfield. We moved to Ashover because we wanted the children to grow up where there was more space outside for them to play and where there was a safe garden. Both children went to the local primary school, and we feel we're part of the community with lots of local friends. We use the local shop, butcher and post office. Although I am told by Anna in the local shop that it'll be a few hundred years before we're considered to be locals. We fell in love with the house as soon as we saw it. It had been derelict for many years before renovation in 2005, but much of this was poorly done. The house is small, and as the children have grown, so the house seems to get smaller. We are in effect now 4 adults living together. We could move, but we love where we live. We would never do anything that we feel will be detrimental to the property, but things are not perfect. It needs a larger kitchen. There's ongoing movement to the gable, which we want to stabilise, and we have recurrent cracks appearing along stress points in the kitchen. We can hear movement in the wall, and there's often a gritty substance found on the floor near what used to be the fireplace. In the morning, there can be a gritty film on top of our dog's water bowl. I previously applied to extend the kitchen, but this was rejected. But I took note of Mr. Kirkham's comments that I did not have a structural engineer's report. I've included one with this application. A small kitchen extension will act as a buttress to the gable. It has been suggested that standalone buttresses could be built, but I believe these will be unsightly and not at all in keeping with the cottage. They will detract from its beauty and character and not preserve it. If not sorted, the structural engineer believes the whole gable will in time need to be rebuilt, and then we lose all of what we now seek to preserve. The kitchen itself is not fit for purpose for a family. By way of example, if the oven door is open, it can only have things placed in it from the side. There's not enough space for us to stand in front of the oven. It's not possible for two of us to be in the kitchen and to prepare a meal together. For instance, nobody can stand at the sink whilst the oven door's opened. We need a larger oven. My son was diagnosed with an eating disorder, and despite treatment, this will always be the case. He can't eat the same meals as us, and we need to prepare separate meals. But the size of the oven which the kitchen allows for means this can rarely be ready at the same time for us to eat together. The boiler's in the kitchen underneath my daughter's bedroom. It's noisy and it wakes her in the night and in the morning. We would plan to place the boiler in the kitchen extension. Even during a bright summer's day, we need to have the lights on in the kitchen due to the lack of natural light. This is not an exaggeration. Whilst we don't propose a large window in the extension, having one will mean there's more natural light and we can use the room without having to use electricity all of the time.
30 seconds remain.
Yeah. Neither the Conservation Officer or the Planning Officer review the inside of my kitchen, so I do find it hard to understand how they've assessed the proposals. I do have comments on the history of the building, but we'll talk about these under the list of building consent. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Foster?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wortley, for that. My question is, you mentioned around better. That seems to have done it. Was that it? You mentioned about where your house is situated, and it's covered in the report. I visited your property along with the local councillor, Councillor Armitage, and it's all about how your house sits. It's mentioned that it's on a hill, but I've looked for where it's visible, and I can't see that it's visible from anywhere at all, apart from a small gap between 2 trees. And that's at like a road 200 meters away. Can you elaborate any more on that, please? Because that's what I've seen. So it's about the visibility. So give other people that haven't seen your property an idea of how it sits.
Yes, but that's part of the reason the extension has been designed as it is. So from I'll call it the front of the house. So that's the very attractive bit with the lovely stone windows. So if you were looking towards the front of the house, and you'd have to be quite some distance well beyond the Miner's Arm. So I'd probably say at least a quarter of a mile away before you can actually see the front of the house, and the extension wouldn't be visible then from the front. There's only other one house near us, actually sits just above us. That's Common Bank Cottage. It's not possible to view the extension from Common Bank Cottage. So yes, you're right, because of the actual elevation, although we're high up, actually the way the land falls away, it means that from you'd have to be some distance away to be able to actually see the extension. But the extension was built in the same material as the actual original wall. So I think the distance you'd have to be able to see it, I don't think you'd actually notice the difference.
Thanks for the answer. I think that was worth pointing out, Chair.
Yes, thank you. I do know your property. I've been past to have a look as well. And I agree, you can't see it. I nearly got lost. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the speaker? Councillor Powell?
Yeah, am I right in thinking the extension would go what effectively looks across a track or drive?
Do you mean the actual, where the stones are at the side of the current gable ends?
Yeah,
That's just our land. There's no track or drive. It's just the way we would walk from where the car's parked to go into the back garden.
and if the extension was built, would you still have access? Or would you have to create another access for walking or whatever?
No, we've ensured it's at least a metre wide so that if a wheelchair needs to get by, there's still sufficient room for wheelchairs, lawnmowers, whatever it might be to still get by the property as we could now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No, thank you very much. Our next speaker on this is Charlotte Stanton. Three minutes when you're ready, Charlotte.
Thank you. Charlotte Stainton speaking on behalf of the architect. Some of you may remember that Simon and I were here in 2019 in relation to Simon's previous application for a kitchen extension and sunroom. At that meeting, the scheme was refused by only one vote, and Simon was specifically told that he should have provided a report from a structural engineer to explain the issues with the gable. The design has been amended by a different architect since the previous scheme. A structural report has now been provided, and the application is accompanied by a design and heritage statement. We are surprised that the officer reports do not refer to the previous reason for refusal and this new information to consider whether the issues have now been overcome. My client's property is called Common Bank House. There is significant confusion about this in the reports, and the recommendation itself refers to Common Bank Cottage, which is next door. We are concerned that the proposals have not been considered thoroughly. Simon has confirmed that no internal inspection of the kitchen, the proposed location of the opening, or the gable wall has taken place. The officer report confirms in section 7 that the principle of an extension can be acceptable, provided it is in keeping with the existing property and the street scene in terms of the style, proportion and materials, and it should avoid significant loss of privacy and amenity for neighbours. At 7.9 of the report, the officer confirms that the extension will be modest in scale, their words, and we agree. The extension would be 3.6 metres by 2.5 metres at its widest, or 11 feet 9 by 8 feet 4 in old money. It will be subservient to the existing house and gable, and due to its position and scale, it would not be easily visible from views outside the site, and any views would be long distance, as you've just heard. The photograph on page 64 does not show an accurate view from the proposed extension. However, it is welcome that at 7.23, officers confirm that there would be no greater impact on design has been based on a review of extensions in the locality, many of which are 2 stories. The applicant and architect have made it clear throughout the application they are willing to negotiate with officers. We firmly believe this single-storey extension would be in keeping with the existing house, and at the same time, it would also enable Simon to make the gable of his home safe. We ask you, please, to support this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stainton. I'll move this over here in case
I'll turn this.
Unless it's that one, it might be that one. Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much for that. Right. When we look at what's in our officer's report, we've got impact on countryside, impact on listed building, and impact on neighbour immunity and privacy. It's the middle one, impact on listed building. And I mention it because twice now you've mentioned in keeping with the style, proportion, and materials. So it's that statement you mentioned, in keeping with style, proportion, and materials. Can you tell me why, when you've mentioned that, why those 3 things, style, proportion, and materials, why should they help us with SDC 6 and SDC 12? So it's a specific question around that. I'm not leading Miss Stainton, but it's because she's mentioned twice now, keeping with style, proportion, and materials, how it affects that middle element, impact on listed building, and those two policies, please. So specifically that.
Yes, thank you. Understand. The issue that we've had as speakers is that we've got a planning application and a listed building application. And in a minute, we'll be doing a speech about the listed building application. So it's been quite difficult to avoid repetition between the two. So hopefully in the second speech, you will hear more about listed building side of things. The application is accompanied by a planning and heritage statement. The architect spent considerable time looking at the scale and design and detailing of the proposals. You'll hear us talk in a minute about the roof design in particular, which has been mentioned by the conservation officer. We firmly believe that the extension is subservient to the existing building. It will be absolutely evident that it is an extension, which is important. We're not trying to pretend that it was part of the original, because it's single story, it's on the end, it's set in from both the front and rear elevations, which you can see on the floor plans. We genuinely don't think it has a significant impact on the heritage asset. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Would you like to take your seat? Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is how this was originally presented, Adrian, and it's around when you said the significant change to size, and you said that significant change to size, you'd encompassed the earlier extension and added it to this much more modest 2.55 by 3.6 metre. And it's those two you put together, I believe, from what I understood, that gave it the definition of significant change to size in officers' views. So my question is, when that's already been given planning permission, and we've already, should we not look at this separately when it comes to whether this is significant or not? Chair.
Just in terms of that, Chair, the policy LC5 talks about extensions to dwelling houses, residential extensions. And it says outside of settlement development limits, proposals which either individually or cumulatively involve a significant change in the scale and character of the original dwelling will be assessed as a proposal for a new dwelling. So in this instance, officers taken into account the extension to the rear, so the two-storey rear extension, the western elevation, and this, so a cumulative impact of that, and whether they then result in a significant change in the scale and character of the original dwelling is what the policy says. And if you believe that it does involve a significant change in the scale and character, that would be assessed normally as you would for a new dwelling in the countryside, which would be, you wouldn't give permission except in particular circumstances. So that's the assessment that we have. So as you've been discussing with Charlotte, you'll need to take a view as to whether as a whole that the dwelling is so altered, its scale and character, and also you need to take into account, again, as you've been discussing, whether that's an adverse impact. So it's that two-stage process, if you like.
Any further questions? No. I'll open the floor for debate. Councillor Liggett?
Thank you. I walk that area as well. So as you said, you can't see that cottage from anywhere, to be honest with you. And also that little tiny extension, my opinion, you see dozens of little tiny extensions on traditional Derbyshire farmhouses, cottages, and I think it's in keeping, to be honest. I think it'll look rather nice. And like Charlotte said, it's not trying to be anything it's not. It is obviously a small extension, which, as I say, I think you see dozens of those, and I think it just looks in keeping, and a damn sight better than buttresses. And I think it will work as a buttress.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to address both impact on countryside, impact on listed building, and impact on neighbour immunity and privacy. Impact on the countryside, I don't think it has any impact at all, much like we just heard from Councillor Liggett. It's such a, in itself, it's not modest, it's small. I've been there. And when I've stood alongside that building, I'm surprised that that gable end's holding up at all. It's not, you can't really see it from the photos, but there's, you know, it's patched up, but it's surprising that that is actually still holding it up. So I don't believe it's significant in itself at all on that side. You certainly can't see it from any neighbouring properties. So that's the visibility. On to 7.12, the Conservation Office is concerned that a further extension would detract from the character of the property. I don't believe it would detract from the property at all. So that's our planning judgment there. So for me, I don't think it'd detract from the character at all. Certainly not have a negative impact on the character and appearance of the site at all. Onto the impact on the listed building, which I've questioned the witness about on STC 6 and STC 12. STC 6, when we look at how it's described, it's made of random limestone, dressed gritstone window surround, slate, and painted windows to match. So I think the intention is obviously to make it match the rest of the building. I don't think there'll be any difference at all when it comes to how it looks compared to the rest of the building. So I think it ticks that box. And on the last one, which I've got to say, Chair, this one I find absolutely comical. The last one really is, and I know this is the last planning meeting we've got of this administration, but I've got to say, impact on neighbour immunity and privacy on LC5. To say this impacts on any neighbours is maddening. It reminds me only of 2 months ago when we looked at one in Colaston where we replaced a bungalow and we put a huge extension on the bungalow and it overlooked 12 properties, and we had people in here saying this is going to overlook us, and I spoke on that, and that really did impact on neighbouring. So we shouldn't be talking about other planning applications, but it really did in the most obvious way, and we let it go through here. This one is the complete opposite on the scale. It's not going to affect anybody at all. So certainly on an LC5, it's more than acceptable. And STC 12, it isn't contrary to any of those policies, A to M, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think Councillor Foster has really said everything that I would want to say. I agree entirely with everything that he said. I used to live opposite that house and you couldn't see it. And the only thing that gave it away was when he used to put his Christmas tree up and he used to light it. And that was the only time you could actually see it. So as far as I'm concerned, it should be passed.
Chair, if I may, just one point, just in terms of the issue on neighbouring amenity that Councillor Foster mentioned, just want to confirm, Chair, that officers have concluded that there wouldn't be an adverse impact on privacy and amenity of neighbouring properties, just so the committee can be clear about that at the bottom of paragraph 7.23.
Okay, if that's the end of the debate, I'll open it for a motion. I'll let the clerk go through the process.
Right, thank you, Chair. Please bear in mind, members, that a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment to a motion is moved and seconded, then that amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved which goes against the officer recommendations, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reasons for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by the evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations falls, or in other words, it is not passed, that doesn't mean to say that the recommendations are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendations or a different course of action. This will need to be approved by the committee through another vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll open the floor for a motion. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose that we give this planning permission against officers' recommendations. One is that it doesn't have an impact on the countryside. So I think that's SS9. Are you okay with that, Mr. Kirkham? Yeah, that it doesn't go against SDC 6. We've already got a description there. We've got a description there from the design and sorry, Chair. That it doesn't contravene SDC 6. Yeah. That it isn't contrary to anything in SDC 12 A to M. And I think we've already covered LC 5, Chair. Is Mr. Kirkham happy with are you happy with those policies?
There's no problem, Chair. Members are minded to grant permission. It's only for the minutes. I think that the reasoning may be necessary, but if members are minded to grant permission, Chair, again, the question that I would ask is whether there are any specific conditions that members would wish us to attach to any permission granted, or whether that should be, members would be happy that to be delegated to myself in consultation with yourself, Chair, and the Vice Chair. But no, happy with what Councillor Foster said, Chair. That's
Councillor Liggett.
I'm just going to second it, please.
Okay, that's fine. We go to the vote.
Yeah, so just to be clear, Chair, that the recommendation, or rather the motion, is to refuse officer recommendations. So in other words, to pass the application on the grounds that it would be in line with policies SC5, SS9, SD6 and SDC 12. And that following on from approval, if indeed that's granted, any conditions be delegated to the Planning Manager Development Management in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. That the essence of it, members? Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Foster. Councillor Fennell. Councillor Hartshorn. 4. Councillor Lacey. 4. Councillor Liggett.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Ruff.
4.
And Councillor Winley.
4.
That's 10 for and 1 against. The motion has passed, Chair.
Thank you. Now we need the second part of the application.
Chair, just before members go on to debate this, I'd just like to remind members of the particular statutory responsibility you have in terms of preserving and taking special regard to the listed building and the planning issues around it.
As we've already had the presentation from the officers, we'll go straight into the speakers again. If you'd like to take a seat, thank you. Three minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Yes, the house is built of random limestone. We'll also use local random limestone to match the existing property. The hole we want to make for access to the extension is small in comparison to the overall wall, which will be left in situ. Most of the area we want to remove has been poorly repaired during the renovation, and the mortar does not match the rest of the gable wall, or in fact the spacing of the stones. I'm told the kitchen had several uses in its time, and some of the older neighbours still remember it being used as a pigsty. I've managed to buy old photographs and postcards which show the house from a distance. I've not managed to find anything closer. I do know from talking to those who've lived around for a long time that it used to be owned by a Miss Lim, and there was no running water, only a standpipe at the top of the drive. There used to be a fig tree in the garden brought back by a son of a previous occupant returning from France after World War I. He planted the tree, and I'm told that the figs were regularly taken to the village and handed out. Unfortunately, the fig tree was lost when the house was renovated, but I have bought and planted another one. I've also managed to trace the original stone salting table, which was removed from the property in the 1970s, and it's my intention, if possible, to reincorporate this into the new kitchen. I did not make anything of the fireplace in the application because it was not raised as an issue when I applied before. It's not a nice original fireplace. Where there would once have been a stone hearth, I have an unsightly lump of grey concrete and where the open fireplace would once have been, we have a crazy paved stone effect from 2005. I want to reassure you that I will do all I can to make sure this house is preserved and looked after for those who will follow me. We would never want to spoil that which caused us to fall in love with it. We simply want to make the house suitable for a modern family, using the same stone from the ground and to ensure the gable end is preserved and safe. The extension is small in size and designed to complement the house and be in keeping with the gable extensions seen on other houses near us, also in random limestone, some of which are 2-story as opposed to our single-story plan. We wouldn't want to harm a house which has stood for around 250 years and which we know we are only the caretakers of. There have been no objections from my neighbours. The window will look onto my land, and this is a house I intend to live in until old age, and the application for an extension is not for any commercial gain. I can only ask that you consider approving my application for what would be a small kitchen extension, but one which will have a huge positive impact on me and my family and our continued enjoyment of living there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Nope. Thank you. If you'd like to
Thank you very
take a seat.
much.
Thank you. 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. As I explained earlier, the design has been amended by a new architect since the previous scheme. A structural report has been provided and the application is accompanied by a design and heritage statement. The officer report confirms at 7.2 that the Ashover Neighbourhood Plan supports proposals which preserve or enhance listed buildings. Proposals should use materials, layout, architectural features, scale and design that respond to and do not detract from the listed building. The extension would be single-storey and subservient to Common Bank House. The extension would be crafted by a local specialist builder using locally sourced limestone to match the existing house. We believe the design is in keeping with both the existing house and the local vernacular. A pent roof design was considered, but there are no local examples. The ridge design chosen has been approved for gable extensions at Brookside Cottage to the east and Jetting Cottage to the south, for example. The roof lights could have been removed from the design if officers had requested, and they could still be removed by condition if the committee consider them to be harmful. We don't. We firmly believe that this single-storey extension would be in keeping with the existing house and at the same time would enable Simon to make the gable of his home safe. The structural report has confirmed that the gable wall requires stabilising works to make it safe. This single-storey kitchen extension would provide a way of ensuring the gable can be made structurally sound for the future of this building. An alternative scheme would be buttressing, which we believe would be visually harmful and not have the benefit of improving the accommodation within the house. Your policies allow for extensions to listed buildings, and as you know, extensions have been permitted on many listed buildings in the Ashover area and beyond. We ask you please to consider what harm this kitchen extension would create. The position of the extension would follow the linear footprint of the house. Unlike the previous proposal, it would be set in from both the front and rear elevations of the house and would be constructed in matching materials with sympathetic detailing. We believe that this modest single-storey extension would not harm the character, architectural merit or historic interest of the building and would preserve the significance of this heritage asset. We ask you please to support this listed building consent. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the officers? No, shaking his head at me. I'll open the floor for debate. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When we look in the recommendations, what is being refused for, or the recommendation is to refuse, it talks about harming the character of the listed building. As I've said before, I don't believe this does harm the character of the listed building at all. And you can, it's clear from what you can see from the building, if you saw it, that it does need some form of work. It needs buttressing or it needs taking down and rebuilding. So I don't think this would be any harm at all. And then lastly, in the last paragraph, overall, it's considered that the proposed works would fail to preserve the significance of the heritage. I don't think that's true. I don't think it would at all. So this is a matter of it's our planning judgment here as a committee, and I believe we should be giving this planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comment? Councillor Armitage?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that Councillor Foster has said again. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a way of preserving this listed building because it's like the engineer has said that if something isn't done, it's going to fall down. And that seems to be the best and sympathetic way of preserving this building.
Thank you. Adrian, do you want to say anything before we move to a vote on motion?
All I would like to say, Chair, is to note the comments of your conservation officer at paragraph 4.4. And it's not just the issue about the extension before you this afternoon, it's the cumulative impact of extensions to 3 sides of the listed building and the gradual deterioration of the significance of the heritage asset that is of concern to officers, and the lack of a justification in this instance to demonstrate why the extension is required, and also to justify the public benefits that outweigh the harm that's identified by officers. The benefits are all to the owner of the building, so there is no public benefit that in the officer's opinion outweighs that. But I would ask members, Chair, to be aware of and appreciate the comments of the conservation officer in this instance and the concern that officers have about that gradual dilution of the building's character and significance, and also remind members that you should have particular regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting, and that's a statutory responsibility that you must discharge, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armitage?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out the fact that the officer, when they went to the house, they never actually went inside. If they'd gone inside, they would have seen all the visible cracks. And I think it was very remiss of somebody who is supposed to be a heritage officer, never bothered going inside. And I am quite sure that the majority of heritage officers, when they're dealing with listed buildings, one of the criteria which they should use is to go inside. And the officer never did.
Thank you. Any other comment? And if you'd like to. Councillor Foster?
When we're talking about, I'll be making a proposal when you move into that part of the meeting. But while we're talking about actual policy, in this part of the application, we're talking about STC 6 and the 3 elements that their proposals for alterations to or changes of use of a listed building will be supported where they preserve the significance of the heritage asset. I believe it does preserve the significance of this heritage asset. So that's the first one. Proposals should use materials, layout, architectural features, scale and design that respond to and do not detract from the listed building. I think that's the case too. They are using the materials there. And 3 proposals which allow for viable uses that are compatible with the conservation of the fabric of the building. People are living there. So STC 6, I'm absolutely fine with that.
Any further comment? No, we'll move to the motion. Thank you. Does anyone want to put motion on the table? Councillor Foster?
Yes, Chair, thank you for that. I think we should give this planning permission. And as I've said just before, just last time I spoke, based on STC 6. I think that's the only policy there that's applicable in this case. Yeah, so it's just on STC 6. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to second that.
Just before you go to the vote, Chair, again, if the committee is minded to grant listed building consent, are members happy for that to be decision delegated to myself in terms of the conditions, again, in consultation with yourself and the Vice Chair? Chair, that's just clarification on that. Thank you.
So just to be clear then, Chair, it's to approve the application contrary to officer recommendations. The essential reasons being that it is in line with policy SDC 6 and that any conditions be delegated to the planning manager, development management in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. Okay. Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Foster. Councillor Fennell. Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Lacey. Councillor Liggett.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Ruff.
4.
And Councillor Winley.
4.
Well, that's only one against members, so the motion has passed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Right, moving on to our final application for this afternoon, which is reference number 22/010004/FL. And this is for Middle Handley. Over to the planning officer.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Chair, I refer members to the late comments report of yesterday. In this case, Chair, the applicant seeks consent to form a new area of car parking access from the pub's existing car park at Middle Handley and to relocate a stable building. The site is located in the Greenbelt. While certain development, including changes of use and engineering operations, may not be an appropriate development in Greenbelt, due to the associated activity proposed here in connection with car parking and general comings and goings, officers consider that the car parking area would be inappropriate in Greenbelt and that the stable's relocation would add harm to Greenbelt openness. Officers' concerns are increased due to the acoustic fencing that environmental health officers consider necessary to mitigate the impact of the car parking on residential properties nearby. Overall, Chair, officers do not consider there are any very special circumstances that outweigh this harm to Greenbelt openness and so recommend that the application is refused. Just in terms of some reprise of what we looked at yesterday, Chair, the application site, members will be able to see Westfield Lane as it runs through Middle Handley here. The Devonshire Arms existing pub with its car park adjoining with an existing access, and access to the site would be taken from the existing car park into the new, although an existing access would be retained for use by horses and other associated accesses to the site from Westfield Lane. So the application site, Chair, outlined in red, members will be able to see the existing access from Westfield Lane here, which would be retained. A new access would be formed this point here to the new site. Stable building on the site would be relocated to a position at the northeast of the site. That's a closer up of that, Chair. And then in terms of detailing, members will hopefully be able to see here that the existing car park area here, access through the boundary to access the new car parking area, which is here, with 2 lines of car parking with a central aisle. Stable building relocated to the northeast of the site. That's the stable building. Just for clarity, it would be relocation of the existing building. And just share a couple of photographs of the site. The site is this area here. You can see the stable building here, Westfield Lane in the foreground. The existing access, which would be retained, this point here, Chair, although access to the car park is designed to go from the existing facility. And then just looking from the top of where that access drive is across the site in front of you here, this is a stable building that would be relocated. The acoustic fencing would be to mitigate the impact of the car park on neighbouring properties which lie to the east, or primarily to the east. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I do believe we have one speaker, James Stannard. If you'd like to confirm your name and have 3 minutes when you're ready.
James Stannard, JS Planning Services. I'm the agent. Thank you. The Devonshire Arms Public House and B&B lies at the heart of Middle Handley. It's the focal point of the village and makes a positive contribution to the community, being a popular venue for locals and tourists alike, providing employment opportunities and wider economic benefits for the region. Like all hospitality businesses, the Devonshire Arms suffered badly during COVID and has still not recovered. It is imperative that the council encourage and support the ongoing recovery of this important rural business and its long-term sustainability. The Highways Authority agree with our submission that the 19 car parking spaces are substandard for the scale of the business, which has a capacity of 100 diners, 7 double bedrooms and employs 15 part-time and 15 full-time staff. In the absence of any adopted parking standards, we submit that as a bare minimum 37 spaces are required in this isolated rural location, although it is reasonable to argue that the more appropriate number is actually far higher. There can be no question that the current car park is too small by modern standards. At busy times during the summer months, patrons are repeatedly forced to park on the verges of Westfield Lane when the car park is full, which I'm informed happens every week, seriously threatening the highway safety of both road users and pedestrians. There are therefore two clear reasons which justify the proposed development and make it an absolute necessity. Number one, the increase in parking spaces will maximise the number of patrons visiting the pub at any one time, aiding its recovery from COVID to the benefit of the local community and wider rural economy. This is a clear public benefit that should be given significant weight in the overall planning balance. Two, the increase in parking will also prevent chaotic and dangerous parking from taking place on Westfield Lane, thereby reducing the serious risk of a fatal accident and enhancing the highway safety of road users and pedestrians, which is welcomed by the Highway Authority. This is also a clear public benefit that should be given significant weight in the overall planning balance. Officers have not cited a reason for refusal regarding the potential impact on members of the public or residential amenity. The report fails to take into consideration the careful choice of a grass-like surface as opposed to a hard tarmac, which mitigates any landscape and visual impact. The report contends that it is general activity and use of the car park which would harm the openness of the green belt. We're saying that due to the site being contained by strong boundary treatment, not visible from any nearby public footpaths, and that the busyness of the car park would vary depending on the time of year, that the openness of the green belt would be preserved. However, in any event, if members were to reach a different conclusion, we strongly urge you to consider that the two very clear and justifiable reasons for the proposal are significant public benefits that do amount to very special
30 seconds
circumstances
remain.
and outweigh any harm to landscape character in the green belt. And we therefore ask you to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thank you for that. This to me looks fairly.
The very special circumstances were set out two main reasons. Obviously, with 3 minutes, I wanted to speak for a lot longer, but I can't. So we tried to, So the two, I'll go through them again. Two very clear, very special circumstances. Number one, it's basically socio-economic benefits arising from the pub recovering from COVID-19 and making sure that there is provision for parking so that the maximum capacity of that pub can be done at the same time without my client advises me that people are not coming to the pub because there is complete insufficient parking and they are minded to go somewhere else. That's one of the main reasons. So it's to encourage that long-term sustainability and make sure that there is parking for staff, for people using the B&B, the people eating there. If you think about how many people, the second one is all about highway safety. And it's about the Highway Authority welcoming the fact that we are creating a sufficient amount of off-street parking that makes the fact that they will no longer be parking on the highway. They are parking on grass verges, which is part of it is going to be subject to a traffic regulation order. So double yellow lines are going to come onto part of that lane, and that will make it so that people have to go even further out, park on the verge. There's a brow of the hill just a bit further down, and there's a bus stop bang opposite the pub car park. So the fact that the Highway Authority support this application, they welcome it, that is a clear public benefit because it supports the safety of pedestrians and highway users. So they're your two very special circumstances that we think outweigh the harm.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Hartshorn?
I heard your numbers. I heard you said there was 100 diners. And how many rooms was it that you've got and staff?
7 double bedrooms, 15 full-time staff and 15 part-time staff on a rota basis. So part of the parking provision is, if you think about changeover, when all of those staff and all of those occupants are going to be on site at any one time, there is nothing left for a sufficient amount. You've got, just to break that 100 down, it's 60 inside and 40 outside. So imagine in the height of the summer holidays, that's what we're getting at. It is a significant chronic under provision.
Any other questions? No, thank you. If you'd like to take a seat. Thank you.
Chair, may I just raise one point before we go into other questions, please? It's just in terms of this impact on neighbours and the point that Mr. Stannard made, and officers deal with that at paragraph 6.11 in terms of the issue about the impact on neighbours, and environmental health officers requesting that if permission was granted, they would want an acoustic fence. Officers haven't put that as one term of refusal because it could be dealt with by condition. But if members are minded to refuse the application and they are concerned about the issue of impact on neighbours, then that could also, it could be added as a reason for refusal, although quite how that would be worded, I don't know, as there is a way of conditioning that out if members were minded to grant permission. But that's the reason why that's not in particular a reason for refusal in its own right, Chair. So I just wanted to make that point of clarity, and I hope that helps members understand that particular point.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the officers? No, thank you. I'll open the floor for debate. Councillor Hartsell?
To be honest, looking at it, I think the benefits of this for the Devonshire Arms and for the local economy, you know, providing 15 jobs, 15 full-time jobs, 15 part-time jobs. I'd be minded to accept this to help development of that area.
Any other comment, Councillor Foster?
Yeah, it's for me, this is open and short. It don't get any clearer than this. It's the first one I've seen in a long time. We've got all our policies in front of us, SS10, and we've also got the National Planning Framework, and it's clearly, and it's accepted that it's already inappropriate development. I think officers agree on that. It's certainly inappropriate development, and the only way we can give this permission is if we've got those very special circumstances, which is like what I asked of the applicant's advisor. And socio-economic benefits to the pub and to the workers, like you've said, aren't special circumstances. They don't come as very special circumstances. They just don't. And when it comes to highway safety as well, you know, we've got to be very careful when we look at anything like that. People park where they park, and as for what we hear from DCC and highways, I take very little notice of, as a lot of us do here. So certainly those two things aren't. They're just not very special circumstances. It's simple as that. There's not much more to say. I'd appreciate anything else from the officers.
Yeah, if I can just comment on what Councillor Foster said, Chair. The assessment that Planning Committee need to make this afternoon in respect of Greenbelt is, first of all, is the development inappropriate development or not inappropriate development, if I can use that term. Now, to be not inappropriate, it needs to meet one of the exceptions to Greenbelt policy. And as officers have set out in the report, changes of use of land and engineering operations may be not inappropriate, i.e. appropriate development in the Greenbelt, providing they preserve openness. That's the test. Now, in terms of advice that government have set out in their advice document that comings and goings of traffic and issues surrounding that can have an impact on openness, and that's the stance that officers have taken in this instance, that the large area of car parking that's proposed, in officers' opinion, not so much by the works that are proposed, they're very limited at ground level, but in terms of the above ground development, the comings and goings of vehicles, the comings and goings of people, the activity surrounding that, officers are very much of the view that that is impacting on openness, and that is a significant impact on openness where there isn't currently any development. So that's the stance that officers have taken, and members will need to make a decision on whether they agree or not with that. If members do agree with officers, then the next step needs to be whether there are any very special circumstances that outweigh that impact of harm, because government have said the protection of Greenbelt is of prime importance. And in terms of that, an assessment of harm needs to be undertaken first of all, and officers take the view that the harm is significant because there isn't any development there at the moment. The area of land that would be taken up by this activity is significant, and therefore the level of harm is in its own right of great weight. So then you need to consider whether there's any very special circumstances that outweigh that. And as Councillor Foster has discussed, that again needs to be a discussion and a consideration that you have, and you need to balance that against the harm. If you follow all that through, then that's your conclusion. In the view of officers, that leads to a significant harm to Greenbelt openness, inappropriate development, and officers are very much of the opinion that very special circumstances aren't outweighing that harm in this case. So hopefully that provides members with process that we've gone through and that you need to go through to arrive at your conclusion. And I believe it's set out quite clearly in the report, and you've heard what Mrs. Sannard has said, that is your judgment, but you need to follow that assessment of Greenbelt harm.
Thank you. Any other comment? Councillor Foster?
Go on, Chair. Yeah, I thought we'd already made the assessment that it was inappropriate, but if you have to make that.
Okay, we now come to putting a motion on the table. And I'd like to recommend that we go with the officer's recommendations to refuse the application. Thank you. You'd like to clarify?
All right, Chair. So the motion is to approve officer's recommendations. Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Foster. Councillor Fennell. Councillor Hartshorn.
Against.
Councillor Lacey.
Okay.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Ruff. And Councillor Winley. So I make that 8 for the motion and 3 against. The motion has passed, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, nearly there. Item 11, planning appeals. I'll now call on the planning officers to explain our next report.
Chair,
Sorry, I was trying to not choke.
We've had the 3 appeals dismissed this month, Chair. I always say this to members, and they do take some reading and they do help and assist us and the council in decision making as they set out the reasoning in all the cases why decisions are taken. In particular, I would suggest to members that you read the Leverton UK Limited appeal. It's a Greenbelt appeal, and it does go into some detail about the issues we've just been discussing about spatial and visual impact on openness, inappropriate development, etc. So in my opinion, it's well written. It does go through the process very well. I probably didn't explain it quite as well as the inspector set it out, but again, I would recommend that in particular, Chair, that decision is one that you read.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Foster?
Yeah, I'd like to say well done to the manager and the planning department when they defended those appeals.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Appreciate that, Jen.
Right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to bring the meeting to a close, but before I do that, I'd like to thank our planning officers and team, our governance team for all their support over the last 4 years, and also all the members here today. Thank you for all your support over the last 4 years. And I do know that there will be some of you that haven't taken up the challenge to restand, and I can actually understand that. But I wish you all the very best for the future. Thank you.